What's up, guys? It's Meta here, and Cadigan is going to be doing the next deck profile. He's going to be doing it on September 2011 Darkworlds for YCS Columbus format.
Yeah, crowd favorite here, right, guys?
Impressive.
But real talk, so this deck it was released recently in the format, right?
It's the last.
The tailwind of it.
This and Great Tornado were like the last editions.
Yeah, great. Oh, God, heroes in this format. Anyway, though, so with that being said, the power level of the new cards that came out, mainly Grapha and the Snoww, they're pretty good for the format. They are very versatile and they generate a lot of cards. And Grapha in particular is really frustrating for a whole lot of decks to deal with. It recurs basically for free, and you technically get advantage out of it if you just bounce a card back to your hand and then have a monster on the board. And warning, that card feels bad. There's not a whole lot you can do about it except for if you hit it with the bottomless or something, it feels great.
You have to warning the card they summon.
Yeah, which sometimes feels bad because sometimes it's just a normal summon Beiige or something like that to get it out there. But you got to do what you got to do. But it has a lot of relevant effects. In that when it is discarded, it gets to pop cards, which is relevant too. You don't have to run MSTs in the main board because of this. If there's problem back row, you could just discard Grapha. If there's a problem monster on the board, you can just discard Grapha.
And it's searchable.
So there's a lot of reasons why this card is good, on top of it being big and recurable, but it's what makes this deck in this format as good as it is.
This is the difference in Agents being the other structure deck. Their boss monster is not searchable. Our boss monster is searchable.
No, it is searchable, just with bad cards.
With bad cards, sorry.
The other card that kind of came along with it in this set on the monster lineup is Snoww, which is just a very generic searcher for the deck. It searches any Darkworld card. You can search a monster, you can search a spell. If you ran the bad traps, you could search the bad traps. I don't even know if those are actually Darkworld cards.
You can search itself.
You can also search itself. If you're
Snoww is a real play.
Yeah, if you're short on resources and are just worried about not having cards in hand to resolve your discard effects to go plus, you can just search this card again. Yeah. So it's versatile, and I'm not going to really reference the if discarded by opponents card effects here. All of them are really good, but you don't typically see them being relevant unless your God help you in the mirror match.
Or if someone is really bad and attacks you with a Spirit Reaper.
Which would be really amusing. But so I'm going to leave comments on those aside because they're all pretty busted. They're all designed to go like +1 or 2 just by activating. So if you wonder why I'm not going into them, that's why. It doesn't typically matter.
I didn't think he had a monster in hand. Okay, leave me alone.
Yeah.
I've actually done that before.
Don't activate Darkworld Dealings turn 1 if you don't know what you're playing.
Yeah, don't activate Darkworld Dealings turn 1.
So if someone ditches a Sillva on you, you're just done. Old cards, Broww, draw cards.
Yes, that's the draw, and it's an easy normal summon along with Beiige.
This card also combos well with this card. It's a level 3 tuner. You can do level 3 Fiend. You can do some fun things with this. You can tour guide this card out so that you can bounce it with Grapha. You can Leviair to get things off of gates. There's a lot of synergies in this deck with it. You don't run more than 2, or at least I prefer not to, because there's a critical mass of cards you can have in this deck that you can't either set or immediately discard for pluses with all of the discard effects you run. So if you have more than one of these in your hand and you activate Drag Down,
they're just going to, Drag Down is a dead card,
There goes your other tour guide, or you don't activate Drag Down. So there's a reason why you don't run 3 despite how easy it is and how good it can be in the deck.
That's the difference between playing this format now and playing this format right at Columbus is we realized that, like, I've seen a lot of lists of people who maybe attended Columbus who were playing 3 copies of Tour Guide and the Sangan, and they're just going to sit in your hand and they're not going to do anything for you.
Exactly right, and that's why you don't run a Sangan either. It's a very dead card. It searches a lot of cards. It searches your draw guards and your tour guides and things like that.
Searches Broww and tour guide.
Then there's another card it searches, but it's good, but it's not really worth it. Beiige, I personally like this more than Sillva in this format, or any of the 5s, either gold or Sillva.
Even though you have Adrius and Tyrus?
Even though they are out, and I will actually, I'll put those cards in here later because you can tweak the deck to just be rank 5 spam, which is good against some decks. Even not going into rank 5s, just having 2,300 beaters recurrently or 26 with gates can be very relevant. It's just, to me, inconsistent, but you can tweak the build to make it more so. It's just whichever way you lean. I like Beiige, and I am just going to flop out the other special summon when discard cards. I do play one Sillva, and to complement them, I do play one Fabled Raven. Lots of fun things you can do with Raven. I like the card a lot because you can discard as many or as little as you want. If you just discard one Beiige, it's immediately a level 7 Synchro, like Ancient Fairy or Dark Highlander.
Dark Highlander.
Which can win games against decks on its own.
That's what one Fiend tuner or something like that?
It's a Fiend tuner and I think a Fiend non-tuner. Everything has to be a Fiend.
And it's light, so Ancient Sacred Wyvern is in play immediately.
Yeah.
So this is 7, this is 8 for synchros.
If you discard just one and just one, this is either a level 7 or a level 8, which I think is really convenient. You can discard 2. So if you discard the Beiige and something else with Raven, then it's a level 4, and you can either go into a level 8 Synchro with that or even a rank 4. So you can do some very versatile things with these cards, and Fabled Raven can just kind of be a blowout card if you have things like Graphas and Beiges and things in hand. You can just flood the board from one card and priority. And just in case people ask where these cards are, they're not legal yet. They're not in here. So this deck didn't have this card, nor did it have this card yet.
So 1 set from Smog, 2 sets from Archfiend.
Yeah, these weren't here yet. That's why I'm not talking about them. They would be really good if they were, especially this card.
That card's really good against like Bulb and Spore and stuff.
Yeah, that card eats
Debris
plants.
Dragon.
Devours the plants, but they're not here, so we're not talking about them. The spell card they got in the structure deck that made them, it really accelerated them just alongside Grapha and Snoww is Gates. It is what it is. It synergizes really well with the deck, so much so that I even run one Terraforming with it, because you really need to see it. Sometimes you don't get Snoww to search it, and yeah, you run a bajillion draw cards, but even having multiples of this card isn't bad, because you can just activate another one and use its effect again.
Gates over Gates is pretty relevant.
Yeah, and you banishing a Fiend from your grave is sometimes to your favor if you can just Leviair it back with the Tour Guide. So it has a lot of synergy with the deck. It really helps you, thin your deck for all sorts of the back row you want to see, mind crushes, drag downs, things that interrupt your opponent or really help you just go off. Your game one strategy is really just to flop cards and hope and just outpace your opponent, and then do well game 2 and 3 when they sideboard cards against you. On that note, drag down. Great card. Lets you pick out your opponent's best cards from hands. It's like
they can't hold things.
Yeah, it's Trap Dustshoot, but you tend to benefit from it. That's really all it is. It's Trap Dustshoot in spell form for you, basically. And people hate that card. That's probably one of the cards people hate the most from this deck, because it just doesn't let your opponent play sometimes. We only run 2 dealings. 3 can be a bit dead, and like I said, God forbid you activate this into
the mirror.
Yeah.
So you hold this card turn 1 until you know what you're playing against, and then even like back at Columbus, people thought that this deck was going to be maybe a little bit more representative than it was. So you'd even see Darkworld lists playing 0 to 1 of this, when in actuality the format is significantly more diverse. And it sucks giving your opponent like a free Dandelion discard or things like that.
If you're
expecting like free
expecting
hand correction.
Yeah, if you're expecting a lot of plant players, you really probably all might side these out. Just because them discarding Spore, Bulb, Dandy, whatever is only going to help them out. But it's a good card when it works. I do play one Darkworld Lightning just as a searchable way to pop back row. It's sometimes very relevant.
It can destroy set monsters.
It can, so you can pop if you think there's a Spirit Reaper or something on the board that you can't punch through with a Grapha or something like that. But just having the one of to search.
Low-key, this deck has a difficult time getting rid of a Spirit. It's a face-up Spirit Reaper.
If it doesn't have
Grapha.
Yeah, without Grapha, it doesn't really have a good way to do it unless you can go into the extra deck. And even then, it's not the easiest thing to do because you can't search the Raven. But I like it as a one-of searchable out to set cards. Blowout cards, you got that card.
Yeah, this card's disgusting.
If you normally don't want to see a lot of monsters in hand with this deck, you kind of like to have 1 or 2, so you can cycle through what you have, but then have more green cards to play and keep going. If you have a bunch, this just wins you the game.
Yeah, if you have like that and like a dealings in hand, and then like a Broww or like a Snoww or something, you could set that dealings, play card destruction, get your pluses, and then search whatever you want with your Snoww, flip the dealings, and discard that and keep going, and it's just turbo.
Yeah.
Which is why we have the Allure and the 3 Upstarts.
That's exactly it. This deck doesn't want to sit around for a few turns and accumulate. You really just want to go right from the start of the duel. And that's why you're running this, and you'll see triple Reckless later, just because this deck really is just live or die fast. Grapha is so good that you even run a Foolish to put it in your graveyard.
Even though it doesn't trigger.
It doesn't trigger anything. You don't get the pop effect, but it's technically going even if you can just summon a Darkworld and bounce it back, because it recoups the cost by putting a Grapha on your board. And other one-ofs that you play just because they're good, Dark Hole and Reborn. These cards don't get you farther into your own game state, but they're good.
And we're not playing Heavy Storm?
That's a good call out. I'm not playing Heavy Storm in my main board. I side it just because you really want gates up at all times. If you're worried about something more back row heavy, then you side it in. But for the main board, this deck tends to go so fast that having a pop or two with Grapha or with Darkworld Lightning is typically enough to clear the way for you to build just an unbeatable board, unless they Dark Hole you, unless you can get a Stardust out or something. But it is more in your favor to not have that card game one. Other Burr cards, we have Reckless, Triple. You don't run any less. You probably would not side this card out. If you're trying to side in cards, you could maybe side out things like the Upstarts, maybe even dealings, depending on what you're playing against, but you really don't want to side these out.
Yeah, you really only have like 3 or 4 spots of side out to keep the consistency of the actual deck moving.
Yeah. So those are the last of the big draw cards, but cards that worked well with Drag Down. This card. Minecraft, you typically cycle through your cards enough that you can drag down and then find this within the same turn reasonably easily. And
you can go fishing for it.
You fish for it, and you do, of course, play Dustshoot, just because why wouldn't you? You already want your opponent to hate you anyway.
But, we're not here to make friends.
Yeah, you're not here to make friends. You're here to play Darkworlds. But messing with your opponent's hand is really good. That's why this card's at 1 and was even banned finally after this format was done. But you have 3 Drag Down, 2 Mind Crush, 1 Dustshoot. You sometimes win just by not letting your opponent set up to do anything ever. And the last card I play, I main deck 1 Deck Dev. I think it's very good in this format, and it's live against just about everything that isn't plants, and even against plants, there are still situations where you can resolve it and it'd still be very good.
There's tons of weenies you can hit with it.
Yeah, like Tour Guide just gets eaten up. If they banish to summon the Spore, you can get rid of it then. When they do bulb things, Tengu doesn't care about it, but it also gets rid of their hand traps. So it's pretty relevant against everything. Karakuri's get hit, Agents, it doesn't hit Venus. You don't really care if it hits the Shine Balls, but it hits Earth before it can summon sometimes. Also, their tour guides and things like that.
Birdman.
Oh yeah, and Birdman, if you play that. Before I get into the extra and the side, I'm just going to show you guys, you can go full on rank 5 with this deck. As we said, you do have Adrius and Tyrus already in this format. Those came out in Gen Force. And sometimes just running big monsters is good for you. It's good for your game plan. People can't get over it. But I don't opt to, but you definitely can. Other cards that you can play in the main that I don't, you can get really cheeky and play Return. I've always found it to be inconsistent, but you could start banishing things like your Graphas from your graveyard and then return them back. But just remember, there is 2 Warning and a Judgment in this format, so there's more copies of those than you have of this card. So it might not always resolve for you. And if you don't like
the Recklesses,
it's not even the Recklesses. It's like the Mind Crushes and things like that. But you can take out anything in the Trap lineup and replace it with these cards. Like I've told myself, if I didn't want to be as hand-haty and just wanted to stop my opponent from resolving something on the field rather than trying to pick it out of their hand, you just run the Solemn Brigade here. And Torrential is just a good card that you can kind of slot in because you don't care if your Grapha dies half the time because you can just normal summon a Weenie and get it back. But I don't find it worth it to main it.
Or normal summon Tour Guide, make Leviair for something, and then bounce that.
Yeah, or that too.
You have to be conscientious, I guess, of what you're banishing off of gates, so that you know what you want to be getting again off of a Leviair for a tour guide play.
Yeah, and speaking of Leviair and tour guide plays, so I currently am only playing 2 level 3s. I'm only 1 Leviair, 1 Leviathan. If you opted to play more tour guides, I would definitely suggest doing 2 Leviair. The card's really good in the deck. I don't think with 2, I don't think you need 2 of these, and you want 1 of these. So I'm doing 1 and 1 to make peace. I do also run the Roach and the Utopia. With double Beiige, you make it often enough. If you really want to make it, you can.
You have Snoww is 4 as well.
Snow's a 4, Beiige is a 4. You can make Raven a 4 if you really want to. So you can get there if you want to. And sometimes Roach is really relevant against, like endgame agents and things like that. You don't want their Hyperion to come out. Well, that's it for the XYZs. For 5s, we play Catastor, and we play Stygian Sergeants, which is kind of a funny OTK card. It's not necessarily an OTK card, but it essentially attacks twice, and the second time it's 3k. So it can push for some damage.
It's an Infernity card, isn't it?
Yeah, they do typically play it. But you can play it since you run the Fabled Raven. It just needs a Fiend-type tuner. It can steal games. I've never made it before, but it's in there, and it's good enough that I include it. For 6s, you only play Briow. You kind of have a hard time making 6s, but that's the only one that you really want to run. You could run Orient Dragon.
It doesn't trigger any of the guys, though, so...
Yeah. Oh, God, if it didn't discard for Gauss, that would be nuts. But only...
Mermel's got that card banned.
Only the one you're allowed. All right, so for 7s, the card. So Ancient Sacred Wyvern is one of the favorite cards to make in this extra deck for me, just because it swings for a whole lot of damage. You just make it with Raven and discard a Beiige, and bam, there you go.
Because only the tuner needs to be light, and Fabled Raven is light.
Yeah, so then you have a whole bunch. Now, you do have to be careful with either when you summon it or in what order you attack with it. I mean, I know when you swing, you always want it to be the last thing so you can accumulate the most attack points, but since you run triple Upstart, sometimes this might just start off at 0. So you got to be conscious of that when you're deciding on how you want to try to finish off your opponent and if this is the right way to do it or not. You run Ancient Fairy Dragon because gates.
Yeah, you could pop gates and then do it again. Search another gates, gain 1,000, do it again.
Gate synergy. Black Rose because it's good. Sometimes you do need a field nuke. And the other card, Dark Highlander. The locking out of Synchro Summoning and it being 28 is really relevant against
and it's a fiend as well.
Yeah, so if you got this out against plants, they don't have if you actually get this on the board, it can be hard for them to get over it. They can't tour guide into anything they can get over it yet, unless they have like a Caius or something to get over it with. Like they can't even take this in synchro with it because it's just no one can synchro.
Yeah,
so it's good, and that rounds out the level 7 lineup. 8s, just Stardust, Colossal, and Scrap. Colossal's kind of a flex slot here.
That could be the second Leviair if you really wanted to get there.
Yeah, that could be the second Leviair. That could be an Orient Dragon if you really wanted to run it. I feel like it's good enough to be the third card in this situation, just running over Scrap Dragons and things like that because you don't run Warriors. But that's the one slot that could be flexible if you want it to be. And we round it out with Trish.
The best synchro.
And I'll get into the side, and my side is more just a recommendation of cards you can run, because there's a lot of floodgates that this deck can run, but I think no matter what you do, you probably need to side in. You need to have room in your sideboard for all the spell and trap.
You need to get rid of Shadow Mirror, Macrocosmos, Defissure.
Yeah. So you opt not to main deck these things just for the optimizing the game 1 experience for you. just trying to go as fast as you can. These cards don't go fast. Those cards are just pop cards. So
1-for-1 removal, that doesn't say draw cards.
Yeah, so side that card, side those cards to help against the game 2 and 3 sides. Now, as for recommendations, sometimes I think this card is good enough to warrant a second copy. I have it in here as a suggestion. It really does dunk on things like Karakuri. They can't do much with that card. I mean, if they resolve like a Neutron or something to get an Inishi, that's fine. But otherwise, their tuner, their searcher, the watchdog, the strategist, they all get hit by this, and they can't do too much without those cards.
Yeah, I think the only one is Kuik.
Kuik
is 17.
Kuik 17, and
Pretty much it.
I think that is it actually. Yeah.
Samu the Soldier is 14.
What about the battle recruiter? Isn't that? Oh, that's 12. Yeah, yeah. So that card does hit a lot.
The battle recruit that's 14. He's 14-12, I think, or 14-11 or something like that.
But this deck can run a whole lot of floodgates. You can run Gozen, you can run Light Mirror. You do have Fabled Raven to worry about, but it's one card. You can also run Rivalry because everything's a fiend. And probably the most oppressive side deck option that this deck can get into, that it shares with TG's, is Skill Drain.
Skill Drain.
This deck really doesn't care about Skill Drain all that much.
You slide up the tour guides for Skill Drains, and then...
Yeah, just almost all of your discard options are spells or traps. And it's either Raven and Tour Guide that this only messes with, and I don't even know if I'd bother siding them out for that, but you could. And I have a Starlight in here just because people really want to get rid of gates.
It's going to work really hard to do it. Yeah. There should be a couple duels in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe for more retro format content. Thanks for watching, guys.